Welcome to the solution video for the Razor Pages To Do app challenge. Let's go right to Visual Studio and create our new project. We'll create an ASP.NET Web or ASP.NET Core web application. And let's call this Razor To Do and Razor To Do app. Hit create. And once this gets created, we're going to select the web application, which is going to be the Razor Pages content. And we will change authentication over here to be individual accounts, and we'll store the user accounts in-app as opposed to storing them in the cloud. We're not going to enable Docker support, but notice that we have to now have HTTPS, which is a good thing. And we'll hit create. And now we'll have a fully scaffolded out application that has our authentication built right in. In fact, let's change this to use the console version of the launcher, and we'll launch this and see what it looks like. Okay, it's launching, and we get a window that looks like this. We do have the ability to log in. We do have the ability to register. Let's register myself. I'm going to do PWD12345 is my password. I need to have one non-alphanumeric. So PWD12345 period. Capital P, by the way. And I get this error message saying that, hey, we don't have our entity framework database created yet, essentially. But the cool thing is I can say apply migrations. And once it does that, then I should be able to refresh and say continue. And then it should be able to create my account. And it hadn't applied the migrations yet. Excellent. Let's try this again. Now try refreshing the page. There we go. So the next error it says is that, hey, you don't have a real email sender registered. So you can register one or just click here to confirm your account. I click there, my account's confirmed, and now I should be able to go back to the home page, log in. I can say tim@iamtimcorey.com, PWD12345 period. And let's remember me. And log in, and now I'm logged in. So now that that is working, I can go back and start creating my to-do app. Now we could do this quick and dirty, but I'm not going to do that because I don't want to demonstrate something that I don't want you to do. So I'm going to create a new class library. We'll still do this quick, but I don't want to kind of show off putting your data access right in your Razor Pages application. That's not a good place to put it. So we want a class library and want it to be a .NET Standard library. The reason .NET Standard and not .NET Core is because of the fact that a .NET Standard library can work with .NET Core applications, with .NET Framework applications, and with Xamarin applications. Let's call this the To-Do library. And we'll delete class 1. And then I'm going to make sure I add I'll wait to add a reference until we actually have some classes in here. I'm not going to worry about folders too much. I'm just going to start putting things in here. So new class, we're going to call this SQL Data Access. We'll make it public. And we're going to have a couple of methods in here. So public list of type T, and this is going to be load data. And we're going to pass in T and U. And then we're going to ask for a string that is the stored procedure. And then U that is the parameters, and the connection string name. Okay, not the actual connection string, just the name of the connection string. And we can probably even default that. Let's default it to do, like so. Actually, you know what? Let's do to do DB, like so. We'll use that as our connection string name in our app settings.json. So now we have this load data. We can start putting some stuff in here, but first let's add a NuGet package dependency on Dapper. As you know, this is my data access layer of choice. This is my first choice for data access. You can use other things for data access, and there are some cases where it might be a better choice, but I default to Dapper. Let's do that. Okay. So now we have that. We can say string connection string equals, and we're going to have a configuration. So we'll say underscore config dot, I believe it's connection string. And you pass in the name, which is connection string name. So where does this config come from? Well, this is from the constructor from dependency injection. So we're going to create a constructor, and then in the constructor we're going to have an I configuration and add a using type for that, which is this one right here, the install package for Microsoft.extensions.configuration.abstractions. Find and install the latest version is fine. And now that we have that, we can say config, do our control dot, and create and initialize the field underscore config. And that wasn't right, so let's try it again. Get connection string, there we go. So get connection string and pass in the name of the connection string, which for right now we're defaulting to do DB, which let's just go ahead and create that right now in our app settings. Down here at the end, put a comma, and then put our to do DB, which right now has an empty connection string. So that we at least have the scaffold in place once we create our database, which doesn't exist yet. Now I can come down here and say using IDB connection, control dot to add a using statement here, which doesn't do anything. Excellent. Oops, bumped the wrong key. So IDB connection, since it's not coming up with anything. Oh, there it is. Must have been hitting the wrong key when I was trying to do it. My hands on the wrong spot on the keyboard. So IDB connection, there we go. It's using system.data. It doesn't come up. So we're going to say, let's go with connection is fine, equals new SQL connection. Pass in our parameters. Yeah, spell it right. And then we need a command. Let's go to the next line. We need a command type. And that command type is going to be stored procedure. And we want to return this to list, which again is a using statement for using system.link. And there we go. So what this does is it creates, and I've done this before, and that's why I'm kind of going a little fast on this. This code is pretty standard for me. It's not standard out of the box, but it's standard for me. So if you see my Dapper data access, you'll probably see this code. And in fact, I'm considering putting this into a NuGet package just to make it even easier. We'll see how that goes. But what this is it's a generic load data method that's just going to take in your information and load the data into a list and return it. And it's going to do that using a store procedure. Let's do the same thing down below, but this time we're going to do it with a save data. So public void save data of type T. And again, string stored procedure, T parameters. And you know, I probably should have copy and pasted this. There we go. And then really I can copy and paste this as well, except for the return. And instead of query, it is execute, and it's not of type T. So that's pretty much all there is. I'm not doing a toList here either. So I'm doing an execute instead of a query, and I'm not returning anything. I'm just calling, I'm saying just do this. That's the save. So it'd be an insert, an update, or a delete. And that's really all there is to that. So now I'll create an interface for this. That way I can add it to my dependency injection system. So that's in, I always forget which one it's in. It's in program. Nope, not in program, it's in startup. So we have a configure and we have a configure services. There we go. So in configure services, we're going to want to add a service. So services.add transient. And the transient is going to be our iSQL data access. Control dot to add a reference to to-do library. Forgot to do it before. SQL data access as well. And there we go. So now whenever you ask for an iSQL data access, you're going to get back SQL data access. And that will also then make sure that this iConfiguration gets populated properly through the dependency injection system. So now we have our data access code set up, and we have it wired into our dependency injection system. Now what we need is an actual database. So let's go ahead and create a SQL Server Data Tools project. So our database project, I guess. All right, and there we go, SQL Server Database Project. We hit next, and we'll call this the to-do DB, like so. Actually, that looks kind of weird. Every other letter capitalized, but it's kind of more in line with what we're doing. So once we create this, then we will add our folders. We don't have to do this, but I prefer to. So tables and stored procedures. There actually is a space normally in that folder, so we're going to add that space. Normally for C# we wouldn't add a space, but for this it doesn't matter. It's not being used as a namespace. Okay, so table. Let's add some tables. Let's try and keep it as simple as possible. So I'm going to say to-dos. And we're going to make this identity. So the ID is the identity. And then we'll have the, let's call it to-do text. And we'll make that an nvarchar. And let's give it a little more space here. I think that's what we did last time with the SQL one as well. So we're not going to allow nulls on this. And we're going to have an isComplete, which is going to be a bit. And by default, that is incomplete. And then we'll have an owner. And I think that's all we're going to do. I don't think we're going to go any further than that. But so owner ID, this will be an nvarchar let's say that nvarchar 50. What we're going to do is the logged in user is going to be attached to every to-do. So we'll know this is who created that to-do. Okay? That's one of our things we need to do is only see or modify our to-dos. And we will make that not null. That's our only table right now. And if you did the SQL challenge where we built out this database, you'll notice this is different. And that's because depending on the circumstances, your database will be different. And that's something that there's not really necessarily one right way of doing things because of the fact that different circumstances mean that there's other factors involved than just this is the way of doing things. Okay? So let's create some stored procedures. The first stored procedure we're going to do sp to-dos _ read all. And we're not going to ask for anything except for the owner ID. And varchar 50. And then we're going to say begin set no count on end. And then in here we're going to say select, let's just do select star for now, from dbo.todos where owner ID equals at owner ID. And then from here, we can right click and refactor to three values. So to do text, which is an nvarchar 100. And then we have the is complete, which is a bit. And we have the owner ID, which is an nvarchar 50. Now with those, what I usually do is just copy this whole thing right here and paste it down below. So values, and then paste it back in. And then you just stick the @ symbol in front of all three of these because they name exactly the same as what their name is in the table. Makes it a little bit easier. My semicolon at the end, and now I have my create stored procedure. I can create another one. And this is going to be sp to-dos _ update completion status. So it's going to be owner ID. Actually, you don't need the owner ID. We just need the ID. That's an int. And we need to have the is complete is a bit, not equals. Begin set no count on end, and then update dbo.todos set is complete equal to at is complete where ID equals ID. Be very careful with your update statements that you include the where. In fact, Normally what I do is I actually put the where in first before I do my update, my sets. Because otherwise what happens is you forget about it. And especially if you have multiple things to do and you're trying to concentrate on, okay, did I get all the fields, and you're listing it all out? And then you run that update statement once and it updates every single row in your table. And that's not a good thing. Been there, done that. So make sure you have this where clause in place. Okay, so now we have our update. We need one more, and that is our delete. sp to-dos _ delete. And this is just going to be the ID int. And actually, you know what? I think we should pass in, yes, I think we should pass in the owner ID too. Just like for the update status and, yeah, just the update status. Because the read status, I believe you also are passing in the owner ID. Yep. So with the create is fine. The update is a problem. We need to pass in the @owner ID and varchar 50. And the reason why is because we're going to set the ID and owner ID equals owner ID. Otherwise, what could happen is this store procedure could be called with the wrong information, essentially. So you could pass in a random ID number, let's say ID number 1, but you didn't own that, and it would still update it. Now, in theory, you should stop that at the API layer or at the a different layer, but this way we're sure that you cannot update anything you don't own. Now, that doesn't stop you from spoofing who you are. You can still pass in a different owner ID. But that's a little more difficult, first of all. And second of all, we're not going to allow anyone to call these store procedures except through our Razor page front end, which is not going to allow them to specify who the owner is. We're going to get that from who's logged in. So that's where the rest of our security comes into play. So there's the update. Our delete, our read only, there's our delete. So we have owner ID. So now you just say begin, set no count on. Then we're going to say delete from dbo.todos where ID equals, let's capitalize that, right? ID equals ID and owner ID equals owner ID. End. Okay, so there's our delete statement as well. So now we have the basic structure for our database. I'm going to create a publish script. So let's create a folder for this now. So publish profiles. We're going to say publish. I'm going to save this to the local host. Hit OK. And the database name is going to be actually I said to do DB on it. Like that, I believe. And I'm going to save the profile. I'll save the publish profiles and hit OK. And now that I've saved it, it's right there. I can just hit publish as well. And that will create my database for me. All right, so it took about 5 seconds to do. No big deal. Now my database is created. I can start creating my pages. Or actually, yeah, just a couple of pages probably. Okay, so let's create a page first of all, a Razor page. Let's create a Razor page, no entity framework, just Razor page. And we'll call this to-do list. And we're going to generate the page model. We're not going to create a partial. We're going to use the default layout. We hit add. Once this gets created, it's going to take a little bit, but it's going to create our page for us and basically just be blank. And then from there, we're going to add a really simple way to list out all of our to-dos. Okay, so here is our list essentially. Now let's create a folder here for models. And inside here, I'm going to create a model that's going to match up with my to-do list, which is this table right here. So I'm going to open it up, that way I can see it. And then I'm going to right click and say add new class. I call this my to-do model. And then I can actually pull this out like so. It wants to snap so badly. But this way I can actually see, come on, I can actually see both my table and my model. I could have split the screen, but I think this works just fine. I'm going to say int ID. I'm going to say string to do text. I'm going to say bool is complete. And I'm going to say, do I capture the owner information? I may not pass that back. I'm going to at least have it. The question is, do I allow the user to see what the owner information is? And probably I don't. So what I'm going to do is I will Control S to save this. I'll close it out. And then in my queries, so I read all, I'm going to get rid of the owner ID. There's not really a reason for the user to see that. It won't hurt anything, because even if they tried passing it back, they still can't override my front end. But that could, in theory, allow them to capture that information, and if they get directly to my database instead of going through my front end, they could do some work on a different user ID. That's a stretch, but there's no reason to add that information. So it's basically going to have a null value for those records. I'm going to keep it in my model, though, because on the other direction, I will want to have that. So now with this, actually, that's a good question. Do I really want it? I'm going to say no, after all, because I'm going to create an anonymous object anyways for setting it in, because I won't have this ID. So I'm going to create anonymous objects. So therefore, I'm not going to put it in this model. No reason to have it at all. I do need to republish my database now that I made that change. And that can go on behind the scenes. That's not a big deal. So I'm going to have a property here, which is a list of type to-do list model. No, to-do model. Not to create initialize my field. And now here I can say SQL.load data of type. I'm going to say to do model. I don't need to pass in U, because U is going to be inferred by this parameter. So a stored procedure is dbo.sp2dos underscore read all. but that does take in a parameter. So new anonymous object, and the owner ID equals, we're going to grab the owner ID. We'll grab that in just a minute. And then we won't pass in a database name because we're going to use the default. And now we need to say to-dos equals, oops, capital D. There we go. So, we do need to pass in a second type. I believe that will work. Passing in dynamic as the type. And so now we have our load. And what this is going to do is going to load the data from our database. It's going to get a list. It's going to put that into our to-dos property, which can be read by the page. So what is the owner ID? Well, we can do this. Let's actually put this on another line so we have a little more room. And we can say user dot find first claim types. Do a control dot here to add using system.security.claims. So claim types dot, we want to have the name identifier, and that's our owner ID. So it's pretty easy to get the information. This is built into .NET Core. So you say user dot find first, and then claim types is name identifier. There's other types here, so you can grab other information. For example, their name. You can get their email address, which is email right there, their expiration information, date of birth. But remember, you have to capture the information in order to then pull it out. So date of birth, we're not capturing that. Therefore, you can't pull that back out. So that will get us our list of to-dos, but that's not going to be very helpful if we don't have any to-dos yet. So let's add another page, a razor page. We'll say add, and this one is going to be our create to-do. And we'll scaffold this out. And this is where usually for things like this, we're kind of pushing what Razor Pages is best at. We're kind of expanding it beyond what it's best at. This is probably more of a case for an MVC application. But I want you to see the differences to see why you might want to use an MVC application, or actually an MVC portion of a web application versus a Razor Pages portion. Razor Pages are much more about a single page, whereas this is kind of like a series of pages. So we'll have to work with it a little bit more. Okay, but that's okay. We can still do it. So we're going to grab a lot of the same stuff here. Let's grab just this for right now. And create a constructor, CTOR, and this constructor, we're going to pass this in. We'll do a control dot here to add our using statement, a control dot here to initialize our field, and now we have access to this page, or this SQL data access. So what we need right now is we need a few properties. So prop, and the first one's going to be a string, and this will be, what do we call over here on our to-do is to-do text. Let's keep the same convention going here. So to-do text, and we also want the prop bool is complete. And I believe that's all we need for our create statement. We need to-do text is complete and the owner ID, which we're not going to ask the user for. So now we make sure that these are bind properties. So bind property, what that's going to do, it's going to allow us to post to these values so that when we save this page and say, okay, save this or add this to do, it's going to be able to fill these properties. So let's create our post method first before we even create the page itself. So public, usually it's an iAction result, which will probably redirect to the list from this. So on post, and what this will do is we're going to say SQL dot save data, and this is going to save data into the store procedure dbo dot to sp the then call it to do text. To do text and is complete. So to do text, and the type is going to be text, and the placeholder is going to be to do item. Something like that. And then we'll have another one, input ASP-4, and this is going to be is complete. And the type equals checkbox. The no placeholder, so close that out. And then we'll have a button. The type equals submit. And we're going to say that this is the add to do item. Really simple page. So let's see how this find, and then say we need the value for this. that value is going to be a string. Let's grab that same value and come over here where we're also calling it and make sure we're asking for just a value there as well. This is where you find those little errors in testing, which is good. Make sure you don't have any assumptions here you shouldn't. Create to do. Take out the trash. Add the item. And it says the connection string property has not been initialized. Well, sure it hasn't because I haven't passed it in. Silly Tim. So I go here and I find my to-do DB. I right click and go to properties. This is the cool thing about using the local DB. See this connection string right here? Double click, copy. Come over to our app settings.json, paste. Let's try it one more time. I do believe there's at least one more bug in here, and that's okay. Create to do. There we go. Take out trash can. I like to vary these a little bit just so I know if more than one succeeded but it didn't seem like that, then I would see which one succeeded by the different variations. So add the item, and I've got the to-do list, but the to-do list now has nothing in it. So that doesn't seem quite right. Let's find out what's going on by going to our table and seeing, first of all, do you have data in here? And you do. Take out trash can. So that is correct. I'm going to grab this owner ID. And now I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to do my to-dos. And we're doing a load based upon the owner ID. So let's paste this in so I can do a comparison in my breakpoint. In fact, let's go one step further and let's pull out this value and say string owner ID equals, so I can do a comparison after it's already been looked up. So this is a to-do list. So instead of going to create to do, I'm going to go to to-do list. And it says the owner ID looks to be the same as this owner ID here. In fact, if I were to copy this, actually, you know what? Let's go to my my locals window and do a comparison right here. So it starts with 5327. That's correct. It ends with C2C6. That's also correct. So these are the same owner IDs. So now let's take it one step further. We're going to do a step over. And now my locals window has my to-dos. So that's under the this. It should have a to-dos, which has a count of 1. It has a count of 1, and it has that value. So now I keep going, and nothing's on the page. And I feel like an idiot. And the reason why I feel like an idiot is because I did all that debugging, which it's good to do. But the reason why there's nothing on the page is because the page is blank. So for now, let's just do a simple for each. So for each, and then we have, what's it called? To-dos? Yep. For each to-do in to-dos. Actually, it's going to be model.todos. So for each to-do in the list, what we're going to do is let's do something simple. Let's do a table. Now, some people will freak out by the use of a table, but a table in HTML is actually designed to hold data. Now, it's been abused to be just a layout tool, and that's where we should not use it for a layout tool, but it is designed to hold data, and this is data. Therefore, this is a good use for it. So table, and then inside here we're going to have a T head, Inside here, we'll have a row. Inside here, we're going to have a, let's do TH, and then we're going to say we have the ID, and then we'll also have the to-do text, and we'll also have the is complete, and then we're going to have a T-body. And then inside that body is where we'll put our for each. And say for each one of these, we're going to have a TR. And inside that's a row, so table row. So this is table head, this is a table row, and this is a table header for a column. This is the body, and it's going to have a row inside here. We're going to have some data. So TD. The first piece of data is going to be the @todo.id. And then we'll have a couple more of these. So I'll copy and paste these like so. And this one is going to be the to-do text. And this one is going to be the is complete. And that should be all we need to do in order to get our is complete, not is complete ID. Didn't overwrite my ID. Okay, so that should be all we need to do to display for now. We're going to add the ability to update these, but for right now, let's just make sure that this works. Okay, so there we go. And now we can say our page is /to-do list. And there we go. It's kind of crunched together. ID, to-do text, and then is complete. But we have our list. So that's really all we have to do for both the challenge and the bonus challenge. So we've got our database built and wired up to our, our database right here, built and wired up to our as a gray gradient so that you can have a stripe. Let's just add it just so you can see it, I guess. So there's that. And then I also want to go to our shared page and go to layout and look at our nav bar, because right now our nav bar has just a couple of links in here. I want to add some links for what we want. I could delete the privacy policy because no one's going to read that, but that's okay. I will leave it there because you really should have a privacy policy for your website. So let's do to-do list like so. And oops, that's not right. There we go. To-do list. That's how it's laid out here. But then here, where it's user-friendly, to-do list, like so. And then one more we're going to have, which is the create to-do. Like so. And now we run this. It should be a little bit more user-friendly when working with it. for watching. As always, I am Tim Corey.